is Elyce Wakerman, the author of A Tale of Two Citizens, and also the author of Air Powered, which I think will probably come up soon because I am speaking today with Shannon Crawford, Los Angeles artist and the author and illustrator, I guess you would say, of Relentless Beauty, a very, very beautiful book that I had the pleasure of going through this weekend. Hello, Shannon.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine, thanks. And so I had heard from other sources that Air Powered was an important book in your life, but it was still like, you know, it induced a gasp when I saw it actually in your book, you know, the picture of the cover and various samples from the book. So why don't you just describe, if you would, like how old you were when you first came upon it and why you think it had such a big impact on you?
Well, I had to have been 7, or probably had to have been 6. I'm not sure. I was pre-10. I was single digits. Let's just say I was single digits. And I'm a visual person. I had like some, I guess, learning disorders. I was a really hyper kid. I wasn't the best student. I wasn't the best reader. I didn't retain a lot, and that just got my attention, and I was able to thumb through it. I mean, there's only so much, Bigfoot and Wild Boy and Chips and the Incredible Hulk you could watch on TV, and I just, we didn't have, back then you don't have like 100 channels. You had 3 if you're lucky. Right. And then, and I would thumb through this thing and it was just so beautiful, and I couldn't imagine a human being making such beautiful art. It really, it spoke to me. So, and it was attractive. The cover and everything. It sounds like it was maybe a little comforting also. Reassuring. Yeah. I had that, you described it, that it was like, I think you said something to the effect that looking at these pictures, it kind of validated the possibility that there was a place for you in this world. That's kind of Absolutely.
how I felt, right?
Yeah, sure.
That resonated with an experience that I had as a kid when I first saw Elaine May and Mike Nichols. And they were, I'm sure, their original comedy, and they just captured the absurdity. And I was like a little kid, but somehow it was like, okay, I'm not the only one that sees the world like this, and it isn't all Father knows best and leave it to Beaver. It's crazy. It's crazy. And so it kind of validated the idea that there was a place for me in the world. So the fact that the book that I worked on had that effect for you is just wonderful. Very nice to know. And so, and you do talk in the book, and you just alluded to it, about how you're kind of glad that you were a child when you were a child as opposed to now, because you think there's too much overstimulation, like there's too much visual stuff coming in at kids. And do you think that's, like, do you have any idea if that has had an impact, or how do you think we'll know?
Well, there's always going to be kids that are exceptional and kids that just have it in their soul to create and to paint, or I don't know, maybe I don't like the word soul, but in their DNA, I guess, to want to create, to want to just make things. But it's really hard. It's really hard to want to be that, because there is so much overstimulation. I mean, who wouldn't want to just play that rock guitar game instead of actually learning how to play guitar? When you have a little screen in your hand at all times, or you're staring at a screen at all times, and you have that screen addiction creating those endorphins. I mean, who wouldn't want to pull away from it? There's sugar in everything, everything. And it was getting that way when I was a kid. I'm not saying there was no such thing, but it's embedded in everything they eat. they're inundated with just really just extreme eye candy visuals. I mean, the technology, the 3D animation, et cetera, is just so overwhelming, and it's kind of awesome. I'm not saying, and how wouldn't it pull people that way? You know, how wouldn't it? And so you're zoned out and high from the sugar, you're high from the screen, you're high from whatever ADD medication they've given you because of those two things. And it's a battle. It's really hard to it would be hard for anyone to create under those circumstances.
Have you found that how long have you been so you have a daughter, and when did you start having sole custody of her? Did I understand that correctly?
She was in kindergarten, and her mom had a drug problem, and I got custody of her. And
Go ahead.
She was in kindergarten. It was for a few years. Her mom started getting well and whatnot.
No, I'm just wondering if you found it an added burden of parenthood to try to keep her away from the screen, or was that a problem at the time? All the video games and things like that.
I don't know. Maybe something rubbed off. She's 16 and she's written a whole album worth of music, and she has a band now, and she's playing her first show at the Dragonfly, which is a huge venue in LA. And actually 20 years ago in September would be my first show ever in my band that led to my record deal. At the same club in the same month 20 years ago. Now my daughter's playing it. And but she forgets her phone. She leaves it at home, and it actually gets annoying for me. It's like I need to be in contact with you. You're a 16-year-old kid, so it's like opposite, and I'm kind of grateful for that. She's not some zombie who's staring at her device all day, which is I'm really grateful for that. And for that, she's not the greatest student either. She's in continuation high school. Just like her old man. And, but, hey, whatever, she's creating. There are tons of geniuses out there, all right, all over the world. I mean, there are tons of people who create too, but if I could have a kid who makes things and creates joy, then hey, whatever. And now back to the computer thing and the eye candy. I mean, a lot of those things have been created by creative people too, but it's just taken such a profitable right turn. It's taken such a monetary turn that it's almost sickening,
Well, you suggest in the book, which is kind of interesting, that's the whole raison d'etre for all these companies, and that like there's maybe a larger conspiracy of the capitalist industrial complex that wants to suck the creative and critical thinking out of its children, so that
right.
kind of
yeah,
and that's
absolutely,
yeah. So that we're all victims, and the more developed things get, although developed maybe is too positive a word, but the more that there is available for kids to just kind of stare at a screen or use their thumbs. I'm really interested to see what happens to the thumb, in the next iteration of humanity, because it's being so much more used than ever before. And that maybe this so-called development and sophistication, because it does. I mean, I even have some relatives who are in their mid to late 30s who kind of grew up, I guess, with the Nintendo phase, but they do.
Right.
They're just like they're up all night playing video games. It's just relentless, and it does sound like an addiction. Maybe they'll.
It is an addiction.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Well, that UV light. It's almost like the sunlight, and it triggers the brain. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not quoting any studies on this, but I just my intuition tells me that screen light triggers some sort of endorphin in the brain. It becomes an addiction, in my opinion, and the addiction of validation. I just posted something. How many likes did I get from that? I want to see how much validation I got. Do they love me? Am I loved? You know.
I know the whole likes thing is just insane, and we really have to stop it. We have to. I don't know who's going to stop it, but it is. Once you post something, then the next thing is how many people liked it, and it certainly has become addictive and destructive, I think, as a way of being.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that we do these. Go ahead.
Oh, well, the critical thinking thing is, if I was a billionaire, entrepreneur, business guy, the last thing I want is competition. And if no one has critical thinking and no one is able to create or come up with their own ideas, that's better for me because it's not threatening my bottom line. I just have a bunch of slaves, a bunch of sort of dismal sort of slaves that are just hitting like and eating the sugar and just staring at the screen and not creating. And there will be a devolution, really. And it's sort of like that movie Idiocracy. It's a comedy, but it's a really smart film. I think that's where we're going, really.
Just having like all these people marching in lockstep and thinking that they're being original and rebellious by doing all these video games. Like that's the sense of rebellion, is that you're not really doing anything yourself, but you're participating in this thing that's been orchestrated to make you feel as though you're doing something outrageous or against the conventions of society.
Right.
It's how the culture co-opts just about everything. It's how they co-opted the women's movement, not in that same way, but obviously there are very intelligent beings that want to make sure that people don't step too far out of the lines that have been drawn because that would threaten the society. And, I'm someone who thinks that there have to be some lines. I think that, it is necessary to exist in a culture and in a society to have some rules that we all play by. But you don't want people, robbing your house and, you don't want the Wild West, and but talking more specifically, civility is always nice, and I think it's that you can expect certain things, like when you go to the movies, that you won't be shot. That's working out really well. I know. That's a whole other issue. It's just, once again, it's just this. It's voluntary though. Like all this. It's almost like you think of a for-profit prison system, and it's how is it possible to profit from people being incarcerated? It's like almost like we're choosing. It's incarceration of our own choosing to be locked up in a room, binge watching a series, a TV series, or to be on Facebook or whatever. But yeah. There's a cover story on yesterday's calendar. I haven't read it yet. That talks about the anxiety that's being produced because there are so many great things to watch on television. Forget even video games. But
right.
I guess since The Sopranos and the advent of original programming on HBO and then Showtime and then Starz and then now Netflix and Amazon and call it up when you want it. There are all, and it's been called, I guess, for the last, 7 or 8 years, the golden age of television, which, after decades of just path and awfulness, maybe starting with The Sopranos, that's where I would, date it to, that TV is, there's just so much fantastic stuff. And people are getting anxious because, there aren't enough hours in the day to watch everything.
Right.
That they hear is so fantastic, and it's almost like it's the cliche of too much of a good thing, but it's definitely something. I have some friends, and they said that when their daughter comes home, she's an adult, but she comes home to visit, and she says to them, "Do you ever do anything but watch television?" And they say, "No. No. There's so much good stuff." So
well, my dad's been anti-television for years. He never watched television, and I'll say, "Hey, have you watched that show Bloodline?" "Oh yeah, I love it." Whatever it may be, and it's the same because they finally figured it out, and they were allowed to be artistic in television. They were allowed to have artistic lighting, artistic camera work, good stories, good acting. Hey, what do you know? And then all of a sudden, yes, they're like movies. It's like watching a really good movie. It's the production quality is so high. And then you flip like a network TV show or a sitcom after binge watching these things, and you go and you say, "Oh, what is this crap?" It looks so cheap. And that's why there's been this surge of, because it's gone from this really just cheap crap to this really artistic, well done, these works of art, really. So absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I would probably. I mean, it's interesting because you single out how everything looks, and what I notice is that the writing is so good. The
writing's great.
Storylines. I mean, it's just unbelievable. There is a glut, and I guess video on demand and calling up things when you want them should help in some way. It's not like if you can't watch it at 9 p.m. on Tuesday, that's it. First there was the ability to tape it, and now there's the ability to just watch it whenever you want. I think another advantage of this new stuff is that it's not interrupted by commercials.
I've heard that too. I mean, ideally it'd be great if we all created, but not everyone in the world is able to sit around and paint or write or take photographs or write songs all the time. And so with that said, at least this is what you get when you finally let artistic people have their way. The quality goes up and it becomes a phenomenon, and when instead of you have am I allowed to curse, some jerk in a suit behind a desk saying, "I don't like it," the masses won't like it, and they're using an opinion, and then you're stuck with just non-critical thinking, low-level crap, and it's changed the whole atmosphere.
And also, I think because life in general is a little bit easier, or it has been. I don't know the latest on the stock market. I know this morning it did something very dramatic. But in general, we've come to a point in our society where people, the nature of work is not necessarily labor that has to be something that keeps you and your family alive day to day, because there is so much technology. So there's more room for creative people to kind of do what they do for their way of making a living, like it's income producing. There's more room for creativity. There's more outlets, and it's more acceptable, and we're not in a manufacturing society so much anymore as in a creative, there are so many young people who are writing and making songs and art and drama and movies, and I sometimes wonder, will we have doctors? Will we have engineers and plumbers and all that kind of, just people that will help us keep all of our machines, including our own bodies, going? Because it just does seem that there's, I guess, again, a golden age of creativity, and, let it blossom. But it does, on the other hand, it can cause this anxiety that the calendar article was talking about, that there's just so much. Although music, now, are you still into the music scene? Well, your daughter is, and my son is.
I've sort of passed the torch to her. I have no interest in it at all. I mean, I like performing, but I have no interest in it. we'll see. I mean, things can change. I'd rather paint paintings or go beyond painting and get into sculpture or work on my house. But no, not really, not music. But
right.
Now, but back to what you're saying, yeah, there will be doctors and there will be all of that because, really only 10% of the population are creatives. And it just seems like there's a lot out there because the population has risen. So, but there will always be people who can't draw a stick figure, or can't put rhyme some words together, and they will, or they'll just be raised like you will be a doctor, you'll be a doctor, you'll be a doctor, you'll be a lawyer, you'll be a lawyer, be a lawyer, and that will be, that will be that they will just end up doing that,
That's kind of interesting because at the same time, of course, there's not that much money. You hear of all these music and art programs that are being cut from public schools. So at the same time you hear that, you do hear, and of course we live in Los Angeles, so I think there's probably a higher percentage of kids that are encouraged to be creative because their parents, there's kind of like a draw to this city by creative people. It's just okay. I remember when I first moved here from New York, it's like you could be a freelance artist, and it was okay to be somewhere at 2 p.m, and there would be other people there too, that weren't wearing suits and work, kind of office clothing, let's say. So I think that it might, living here might give us or give me the impression that there are so many kids that are coming out of school that want to continue with especially film. I mean, there's just, and communications and that kind of thing. And I'm all for it. It's great. But as I said, I just hope that the other sectors of the population are developed. We know that there is a shortage of math and science majors. There's a shortage of math and science teachers. And, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Like all the technology and computer stuff maybe will balance it a little bit, the whole industry around technology and Silicon Valley and all that. But it's all very related to communications and creativity in a way that I don't think we've ever seen. So it'll just be interesting to see how this all plays out. I wonder also, you've talked a little bit in your book about being an outsider and how you think that also created the atmosphere for you. Like, do you think personally that a person is born with a tendency towards creativity, or that I guess we're talking nature nurture, or that the circumstances that you find yourself in have more to do with whether you are going to follow that path?
I think it's about 80-20. I think it's 80%, if not 100% nature. It really is. You just have it in you or you don't. I mean, you can try and you'll get these guys, and they're well learned, and it's hard to. I'm trying to think of an example. It's a construction guy who just learns construction to learn it, and they measure the things and they build the house. Or then there's the guy who really has a vision and makes something beautiful. So I think it's nature, 100%. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, or 80-20, or that nudge. There are people that are creative and they never had that nudge or that help, and then they just spend their whole lives really frustrated, excited. But it always comes out. The cream rises to the top. It'll get out there eventually.
Right. So it's not necessary to have like a deprived childhood in order to be creative or artistic, that it's just in you and you're going to see
right.
things. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think it glamorizes poverty and deprivation to say that they're good for the creative spirit, because that's like saying, okay, it's great to be poor. And
I beg to differ. There's a lot of famous actors, musicians, painters, artists that grew up very wealthy, and because of that wealth, they're just able to just take a chance. Like, hey, I'm going to do this, and then all of a sudden it clicks.
Right.
I can spend all my time focusing on this, and with that, that nature in there as well, of course. And then you combine the two, it's like they're unstoppable. And they just end up like losing it on drugs though, or like they self-destruct in other ways possibly, or not. But
right. We are agreed that it doesn't, it's just, we don't want to say that it's okay or kind of advantageous to be someone who has a very deprived childhood, because then you'll be more likely to be creative. And I think that's bunk, and not to be, extended or expanded as a good idea. But there is something to, and this may go, again, along with the whole nature concept, that maybe whether you're rich or poor or have two parents or one parent, or that there is something that you might be born with that makes you feel a little bit apart from the natural order of things. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Now the first part, it cut out slightly. Like it doesn't matter if you're born empowered to have this feeling, or you could be either born with wealth or not to have that feeling to feel a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, repeat that again. I'm sorry, I totally missed that. I was
saying that I think that the creative spirit or the creative impulse may come from the same quality of feeling separate from other people.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly.
That has nothing to do with the circumstances of your birth. It's something. It's something there. And you did talk about feeling like an outsider, not only because of your rather unusual upbringing, but because it was just there. And I love that you said that you weren't bullied, or at least at your first school, but you were teased. That you're not claiming that you were necessarily physically assaulted, but you felt because you were different, and you were different
right.
in a kind of physical way. I was different because I didn't have a father, and that was another thing we have in common. Although you did pick up your relationship with your father, which is great, but at 3 years old, your parents divorced, and at 3 years old, my father died. So that was something that definitely made me feel apart from my peers, because most families had a mommy and a daddy and all the things that you talk about. I love that early painting you have of the kid on the horse with the little cowboy hat. Now, did you ever? Yeah. Did you ever? It's haunting, and of course the skeletal horse. Did you ever pick up the airbrush?
No, I never could. It was too complicated for me. I didn't, my mom wasn't really good at stuff like that, and I just seemed like it'd be too complicated. My ADD thing or whatever, learning, it didn't allow me to do that. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to pick up the airbrush. I picked it up on Photoshop, but I mean, it's not the same. Obviously, it's not that sort of tangible feeling that. But no, I didn't. I wanted to. I really wanted to. It's like, and that kind of prevented me. Like, I want to do stuff like this, but I can't, so I have an airbrush, so I'll have to wait. And finally, I just keep pushing it and pushing it. And I finally got my own thing with oil, with the brush,
Right, which is kind of the opposite, because it's like the brush strokes are very much apparent, and yet some of your work, I thought to myself, is this from Air Powered? Like there's a one called Lotus, and particularly, the ones with the close-up faces, they look so smooth. And I thought, gee, I don't remember this, but maybe it wasn't. And I saw that it was your work. So you've really...
It was mine, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Well,
what might be the influence?
Yeah, I wanted to get really smooth. I tried that. I was going through, in 2008, I was going through a phase where a lot of my stuff was really smooth looking. Right. I wanted to give that a shot and just change it up. And then it led to my most recent body of work, like with the prize, with the woman holding the deer, and that it just sort of evolved into there. And now I'm in the process of a whole new thing. I'm just sort of starting, not too far out there, but just I want to start fresh, like a whole new, just do something maybe even a little more abstract, just not so literal.
Right. So that must be very exciting. Into a
new phase
of your work. Yes. Well, that's what it was for me. My previous work, I did actually do a little bit of sitcom writing, but my books were nonfiction. And it was very exciting to branch out and try something that I've always wanted to do, which is write a novel and a work of fiction. And it was, based on certain papers and photographs that I found that had belonged to my father. And I didn't to write. I had written about the effect of not having a father, but this gave me the opportunity to kind of give him a life, and it was a life that I would make for him, And so that is basically what I hope I have accomplished in the book. And it's really been lovely talking to you, Shannon, and I look forward to seeing more of your work. I really enjoyed the book. I think it's kind of like a graphic novel, Relentless Beauty, and I hope it does not relent. And perhaps A Tale of Two Citizens will also remind people about how immigrants have to go through this feeling of being outsiders, and it would behoove all of us to make them feel a little bit more welcome. So, well,
do I have time to comment on that? On your, are we almost out of time here?
Sure.
Well, I just to sort of tie in your book with, for instance, my upbringing. Human beings are pack animals of pack mentality, and if they almost seek out an outsider just to trauma bond with one another, and so whether it be issues within immigration, which is basically racism, and that all that racism is that ingrained pack mentality that's been in everyone's DNA, in human DNA. It's like this tribal sort of us and them thing, and that's the turning point. I think if the species is to evolve, well, with which I do not have faith in whatsoever, but if it is to evolve, it's going to have to lose that pack mentality, that animal. It's animalistic. It's animal. And then you touch upon that, the immigration and how this sort of this Polish Jew trying to come into America, and he's getting, from what I gather, just sort of getting a hard time from immigration here in the U.S. Does that sort of sum it up to something basically? Pardon my brevity, but.
No, that's definitely. One of the things that kind of drew me to the topic was that not only was it an opportunity to imagine a life for my father, but it was a very dramatic story. But what drew me to it as well was how we are still this country of ours, this United States of America. We're still grappling with how to integrate people that don't necessarily look or behave in the same ways that we do. It just resonated with the same kind of terminology and the same kinds of attitudes that are very resistant. There's this great line in the man who wrote the book about Alexander Hamilton. He says that the American history is basically the story of outsiders becoming insiders. And even and so we can get really pissed off when we hear people yelling white power at a Trump rally. It's very disturbing. It's just
That's like this weird, bizarro universe. Like if we had like a parallel universe, this is the parallel universe where we're in the bizarro universe where he's the president, and then there's like, you know, he has this army of, you know, he shaves that big comb over off eventually, and he has this big chrome dome bald head, and with this, Daddy Warbucks is the president. Like that'd be so insane. Like it's just like that's the bizarro universe. Right?
Absolutely. And let's hope it stays bizarro. But I sometimes think when I'm getting down on this country of ours and the ugliness that you hear, A, we did elect a black person to be president. But B, what this country is trying to do, no other country has ever tried to do. You know, I mean, we really are a nation of many different kinds of people. It's the kind of, you know, I get very moved when I go to any kind of event at a public school, especially an urban public school, and you see the children, you know, lined up on the stage singing their Christmas carols or whatever, and they're from India and Pakistan and the Bronx and France and Mexico and the South. And it's just incredible, and it's hard. You know, we're many languages, we're many colors, we're many cuisines, we're many fashion statements, and it's a very hard thing to do. And we have to like be optimistic. I guess, you know, I choose to be optimistic, which may be obnoxious, but in fact, the narrator of the novel she's described as being, you know, like maybe unreasonably optimistic and sunny, and it gets on the nerves of people who know her. But I just think it's a big experiment, this place.
Right.
And, you know,
well, yeah. Well, there won't, I think, I'm sorry, I interrupt you. You there?
No, I wanted to, I'm very interested in do you seem to have do you have a more pessimistic I
don't think race matters at all. I think people are so caught up in materialism and what they buy and the globalization of these companies. I mean, I was thinking, I've had it. I want to move to Paris, you know. And if I were to move to Paris, I would learn French. I wouldn't try to make it Shannon's Little America right there. I would take it in and be a part of that society. But upon you know, exploring Europe and where am I going to live, I kept seeing a Foot Locker and a Starbucks and a McDonald's, and I thought, you know, unless I have a time machine, it doesn't matter where I go. So at the same time, it doesn't matter if people come here because there are no countries anymore. They're just corporations. It's just one big company. Shell, ExxonMobil. It doesn't. I mean, that's it. And you know, they're making money while we're bickering about our silly little you know, what part of the earth we evolved on, how far or how center or how north of the equator our DNA ancestry evolved. We're worrying about that rather than worrying about the big problem. You know.
Right. Well, so maybe you're saying it just keeps us occupied. But,
just keep them dumb, keep them buying, keep them stupid, and keep them, you know, bickering about things that don't matter. I mean, you know, DNA is all compatible, so there are no races. It's just you know, it's just adaptation to certain parts of the latitude of planet Earth. Really, how far or close you are to that equator. It makes your skin color, and that's all that's all it is. So, religions, and
religion, well, there are all these things that are kind of built in to keep us divided, and maybe you know, that's part of the grand plan. But maybe it's a sentimental thing, but I love this country, and I love that it's made of so many different people. And I mean, it's very interesting that you said you would move to France, Paris, and learn French. And I think one of the interesting things that's going on now with immigrants is they come here, and, you know, to some extent they're interested in assimilation. But they're also very determined to maintain their own culture. And I think that's part of where the animosity comes from.
Right. Right. Yeah. Sure.
And it's all very interesting, isn't it?
It really is, and it just never ends. And then we haven't even talked about religion, how absurd that is. So I mean, we haven't even gone there. But and then you add that element in. It's a never-ending just stew of just hate. You know what I mean?
Well, on the one, it's the opiate of the masses, but on the other hand, it also serves to keep us separate. And also not that worried about what's happening to us here, because there's always heaven, It's the afterlife that people can look towards, so they don't have to be troubled or feel responsible for what's going on here. Well, we could go on, and I just want to say that, we have air-powered in common, we have father-lost in common, although I'm very, very happy that you have, it sounds like a really good relationship with your father. And I also taught at a military school. You attended a military.
Oh, wow.
I could only do it for a year. I just thought, I thought, all right, it's a job, it's a gig, and it's teaching English. But, my goodness. Did you have to wear a uniform?
Yeah, it was terrible. I hated it. I could only handle it for a year. And, it was depressing. There was no art, no girls. I went by there and walked around. It's just, I
was constantly being called to the head of the school was called the colonel. I was constantly being called to his office. Me, I was a teacher. Like, why are you saying good things about Fidel Castro? And why are you? And it was.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's great. Hey,
It was great.
Lenin was not a good man.
No, it was not a good employment situation for me. But, I had a year. I had these little, Miss Jean Brody. I had a year with these boys who were considered helpless in any other kind of school environment. So even though most of the day, they were marched around, but in my classroom, they got to express themselves and do a little writing, and we talked about Shakespeare. And so, I think for that one group of boys, it was a good interaction for all of us. I did have the colonel's son in one of my classes, so I guess he was constantly reporting back, and that's how he knew what was going on. But, all these experiences add up, and they're all grist for the mill.
Yeah.
So,
I really appreciate. Oh, what's that?
I was just going to wrap it up, but let me hear what you appreciate.
No, I appreciate you wanting to do this with me. It's great. It's a really fun time. Good talk.
It was a great conversation, and here's to more art, and maybe we'll run into each other one day.
I hope so. And you're a hero of mine. But the fact that you with air powered and all that, this is really great, and I really appreciate the time.
Well, Tyson was just beside himself when I got in touch with him about A Tale of Two Citizens, and then I mentioned as part of my resume that I had written air powered, and he said, "Oh wow, oh wow." So here we are.
Yeah.
And the more people talk, the smaller the world becomes. So good talking.
It's kind of obscure, and not a lot of people have that book or know of that book. You'd have to be a certain age at a certain time. I was actually younger than most, but it was a very brief moment in time,
Right,
so.
Right. Well, I'm glad, therefore, that, it was there for you. It's just fantastic. And obviously your mother had been drawn to it also. And so we're talking to each other in 2015. And
yes.
Lots of luck, and I look forward to more of your work.
Okay. All right. Well, and I look forward to finishing your book as well.
Thanks so much, Shannon.